Hello, everybody. Welcome to 3-Point Perspective, the podcast about illustration, how to do it, how to make a living at it, and how to make an impact in the world with your art. I'm Jake Parker.
I'm Samantha Cotterill.
And I'm Anthony Wheeler. All three of us are professional illustrators. For the last 25 years, we've worked with all the major publishers and publications in the business, published well over 50 books, and we have all taught illustration.
Each week, we tackle a subject related to illustration from three perspectives. Sometimes we agree, sometimes we argue, but every time you discover something new.
Oh, Lee's not going to be happy that you're changing that today.
It was really hard not to say brand spanking. It took everything in my body to not do that. I'm sorry, and it just feels wrong now that I didn't do it.
You know what? I think next time, Samantha, you and I, we write new introductions for ourselves.
We should. Just call me Sam.
Guest star.
Call me Sam, because Samantha's when I'm in trouble. So
you're
Sam.
not in well.
Sam.
Jake said you were in trouble based on various things. So yeah, we're just gonna rewrite the intro. How do you feel about that, Jake?
I'm fine with that. Let's do it. I mean, that intro was written 4 years ago, and honestly, I think the trend in podcasts today is to not even have an intro. Just be like, "Hey, all right, let's get started."
Yeah. I like the intro thing, though. It's kind of comforting and known. Yeah. It's a known part of it that I think people with their team like.
I listen to a handful of podcasts where they just jump right in. You know, because they know why they're there. You know why they're there. You know why you're listening to them. So
yeah, I don't know. But every time I draw, well, it's like every Tuesday. I know I look forward to Tuesday when it's on. Sometimes you don't post it until a little bit later on Tuesday, like versus like 7 a.m. And I'm like, when is it on?
This is where we argue.
Because here I'm like, it's not up yet. It's not up yet. What's going on? And then, but I do like the intro. It gives me a little like, oh, here we are. I'm drawing, listening to my podcast.
I'm gonna give you Daniel's contact information. He's the one who uploads it, so you can pester him and say, "Where's that podcast episode at?"
I was going to suggest that the folks in the YouTube comments could rewrite the intro for us based on like what they know about us now. Mm-hmm. I would be a little bit nervous about some of the friends in my audience, how terrible they'd write my version and how great they would make all you two sound. So I'm not going to ask that.
Mine would just be full of sentences that don't get finished. So I'm the Fred Armisen when my conversation with my husband. He's like, "Oh my God, you seriously have started this conversation in 15 different ways and you haven't ended a single sentence? I'm all over the place." So
I noticed my part of the intro has inherently built into it is a list. How to do it, how to make a living at it, and how to make an impact in the world with your art. I am a list freak. So
those were some of the best early episodes of this thing, though, is like, here are the 83 things that you need to do to be able to be on Instagram. And
you and Lee were both the list. Lee was also right, because I always felt like Lee was more, these are the 3 things, these are the 4 things. And when I first went on, I remember thinking, I don't have a numbered list. How am I going to be able to compete? I don't have, because while I'm getting a list, I'll go, oh wait, no, now this one. Oh wait, I thought of another one. I'm not good at one set of list numbers.
But before we changed it last week, even Will had a list of things he wanted to talk about. 10 things to do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah. Will's got his own list too. Yeah. I think we're going to do that next episode. Will's going to share his list.
I have a sneak peek. It's good. And I said preek, not
sneak peek.
You guys know.
I don't know what that is, but
I don't know either. Sorry.
Speaking of messing up words, the other day I think I have a mild form of sunsetting. I don't know if you know what that is, but that's
just being old.
Getting old, right?
Yeah.
So basically after 5 p.m. my brain's just toast, and I can't speak coherently anymore.
Yeah.
So I can empathize with President Biden. Anyway, but
you have a few more words in your mouth than he does at this point.
Anyway, we go to the grocery store there's a sale on cereal, and the kids are like, "Let's get some sugary cereal and we'll have a cereal night," right? So we get there and I point to the Cinnamon Toast Crunch, but that's not what comes out of my mouth. Yeah. And I say, Corinamon chunts. I think is what I called it.
That's amazing.
And my kids, that's what we call it now. They wouldn't let it die. They're like, I'm just gonna go get me some Corinamon chunks.
That's
Dad,
almost
you
like
want
the
some
moment from the
Corinamon
Oscars when
chunks?
John Travolta was trying to pronounce oh gosh, and I'm gonna get it wrong. Is it the lady who sang in Wicked? And she's incredible.
Idina
She's
Menzel.
in Frozen. And then completely butchered her name into something that was just so incongruent with what the cue card said. Like he must have just froze, got tight, and there's blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
God, that's
Yep.
I don't know what you're talking about. I never had that issue ever.
When I live stream, so I start my live stream at 3, and I always set that time because it was always the time of the day where I started to, to fall off that hill a little bit, right? And what I find is that the live stream gives me a bunch of energy like right away, but then by like 4:30, 5:30, my words have all, and I've like bitten the sides of my cheeks and just I can't spit out one word by the end of it. And be like, let's just go. We'll see you later, guys. Close it off.
All right.
So a couple weeks ago, after our last episode we recorded together, Sam sent an email with a few ideas we could talk about, which was excellent. Great
Thank
ideas.
you very much. Thank you very much.
And one of the ones that I think resonated with me was a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset, and how that applies to illustrators and people who are like going into the creative arts,
Yeah.
I guess,
Mhm.
the have a creative career. And I think about that, and in my own personal experience, I for many years did have a fixed mindset.
Oh, I do. I absolutely have a fixed mindset.
Okay.
Absolutely.
For the people at home and definitely not me, you two, not me at all, who's never talked about this topic once in their life. What's the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset? Because it seems like it makes a lot of sense, but then you Google it and you're like, oh, that's not something I've thought about before. I mean, that the audience has never thought about.
Yeah. And the minute you start researching it, you see it's everywhere. But I did find, so there was a woman named, I believe her name is Carol Dweck, Dweck, and she had written a book all about mindset. And I'll just quote her because that way we can just get it started and going. So the idea, and then how do you apply that in illustration? So in the fixed mindset, everything is about the outcome. If you fail or if you're not the best, it's all been wasted. The growth mindset allows people to value what they're doing regardless of the outcome. They're tackling problems, charting new courses, and working on important issues. And then this I found very helpful in determining, just quickly go over the differences. And then I think that's a good launching pad for having conversation. So in the fixed mindset, people with the fixed mindset tend to avoid challenges, refuse to receive criticism or feedback, focus on proving yourself, feel threatened by others' success, can't accept failures or mistakes, shy away from unfamiliar things, and believe that talent is static. In the growth mindset, one can view challenges as opportunities, embrace constructive feedback, focus on the process, not the end result, be inspired by others' success, learn and grow from failures, always step out of the comfort zone, and believe that talent is ever improving. And that was sourced from lifehack.org, just to make sure that.
Oh, I thought you just had that memorized. I was going to be really impressed.
Well, now I'll start freely and you'll really know that this was not me. But I think that this is just so ingrained. And so, I mean, obviously it's everywhere. And as an illustrator, especially with people going into illustration, don't you think that you see this often?
Mm-hmm.
That's my accountant.
Let's ask your accountant about their mindset right now.
So, but yeah, so I'm curious now, having said that, how it resonates with you initially, Anthony, just because you said that you haven't really heard of this or kind of dove into it before. So how do you feel about that when you hear that?
Yeah, it's really interesting. So on on my live streams and the kind of stuff that I try to do, because especially like leaving my day job, plunging my family into poverty, taking on illustration later in life. It's funny. I definitely live a growth mindset for the most part, and I also profess that sort of like with my live stream audience and things like that. But again, I've never thought about the two of them sort of next to each other. It's just never been presented in that way. But then I also realize that there are times where I definitely sort of delve back into the fixed mindset portion of it,
Yeah.
especially about things like it's like that concept of I'm either good at it or I'm not. Despite knowing that 8 years ago, when I left my day job, I wasn't good at it. I'm
Yeah.
better at it today. I wouldn't say I'm
Well,
great
because
at
of
it.
the growth. I mean, look at all the effort that you've put into it.
Effort and time, yeah.
I mean, I just think this stems so much from when you're young. And for me, I definitely think reading these and kind of going over this information for the first time myself not long ago, I realized just how much of a fixed mindset person I am and how much I'm working to have a growth mindset. And it's not that when you adapt a growth mindset that the fixed mindset goes away. I think it's always there. It's just you're adding this new perspective that when you're maybe faced with a situation that you realize you're inhibiting yourself because of these fixed feelings, you now are aware of the growth aspect of it, and you can kind of maybe redirect yourself and encourage yourself to learn and move forward, where before you might be inhibiting yourself. And I think it all stems from when you're young and you're kind of labeled, like for me, I think it's when I was a kid, I was always called the art kid. And it really was only because I could draw Garfield really well. Like I was
Very
like,
low bar.
you need Garfield. I'm your person. Like I could copy really well. But I think because of that, I was labeled as the artist. Like she's really good at art. So then all of a sudden I've got this preconceived notion that I can copy really well. I'm a really good artist. I better not challenge myself and try new things, because then they're going to discover that I'm really not a good artist. And so then you almost become too scared to try new things, because then you're exposed. And I think that can be quite problematic when you're trying to go into that pathway of becoming an illustrator or an artist. And if you already have these preconceived ideas of who you are. And
Interesting. Do you think, so you've had a lot of success in your career. Do you think that as you had a little bit of success early on in your illustration career, that fixed mindset either sort of helped you like stay on track? Because again, sometimes it's like you don't take on or you stay in the lane that you've created for yourself to either protect yourself or insulate yourself from other stuff. So do you feel like sometimes that fixed mindset though, like early on really helped, and now it's a hindrance because you have time and age and experience and you want to try different stuff? And I think you said a couple of weeks ago, it's like every 5 years, 7 years, you kind of want to break out of the mold and try some different things.
Yeah, I mean, I think
Yeah.
fixed mindset can be good if you're in a place of stability and you like where you are and you like the known and the comfort of things. And I think it can be okay. But I do think, honestly, I think it hindered a lot of growth because I wasn't open to, okay, here's where we can get, this can be a lot of information here, but social media can be great for so many people. And I think for your business, Anthony, it's really great with your car. I think it's brilliant. For me personally, when I was on it, I was just going off of all the followers and the affirmations and the putting images out and you're so good, you're so blah. And I was not getting the criticism or the critiques from people that either I valued their work or I felt like they were where I wanted to be. Yeah. And I was not growing. I was just kind of staying, and I could stay there and maybe that's fine. But I want to get better. I like to get better. And I noticed with A Grand Day was the first book that I did off of social media. And I surrounded myself with a close group of friends, peers that I really value their work and their opinions, and I would get from them, I don't think this illustration's really working. I think you need to, and I wasn't getting that before. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this stuff is, my book is getting a lot better. My work is getting a lot better because I'm open to hearing their opinions and I'm getting honest. I mean, I'm sure you have that where you've got the people that you go to that you know you're going to get an honest review, an honest critique, just to help grow and get better. I mean, I think that's really crucial. And I think that can be where it's really difficult for kids that are, let's say, going to art school, where you've got the kids that were always told you're the most talented, you're the best artist ever. And then you enter this university setting where you're around all the other kids that were also told you're the most awesome creative person I know. And how open are you going to be to feedback and criticism if the professor at the time says, well, I think you could maybe approach this a bit better, or maybe your compositions need to be worked on? Are you someone that would be able to take that criticism and go, okay, this will be great to get better because I know that all this information I'm getting is only going to help me grow? Or are you going to come into it going, but no, I'm the artist. Like, I'm not going to be able to accept this criticism because then that tells me I'm a failure. That tells me I'm not as good as I thought I was. And I just think psychology wise, there's a lot there that prevents you from growing as an artist.
Yeah, I think for me, my aha moment with this was how I viewed failure. Whereas before, I really didn't want to fail because, like you said, that would show, people then start seeing the cracks in my armor or the seams, and realize, oh, this guy really doesn't know what he's doing, right? But I shifted to realize that failure was actually the best tool for growth that I could have, because every time I failed, I could evaluate that, see what went wrong. It was like, finding a leak in the boat and just knowing, oh, there's the leak. I know what to do. I just got to patch that leak, and then the boat's going to be able to sail a little bit better.
And I think that's the key, though, is in that moment, you can either react to that and blame everything else, but like you can say, well, it's because they don't know what they're talking about. It's because blah, 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 and have a reason, and not be able to just maybe take that moment to reflect and go, what can I learn from this? How can I take this information and apply it with the next project or moving forward, versus putting up a wall and not allowing to use it as a marker of growth? Right. I think you need to go through those experiences, as hard as they are.
Absolutely. And I want to say something too to what you said about, being the art girl, right? And I was the art boy, right? And I look back at, I always grew up, everybody saying, you're such a good artist, Jake. You're such a good artist, Jake. And I really appreciated that. I loved the validation, and I leaned into it even more. I think I did have some inherent drawing ability. There might have been something in me that I could see a thing and translate it to paper a little bit better than the next kid.
Totally. Right? I agree with that.
But because of the positive feedback, I worked on it, and I kept trying to get better and better and better at it. But I didn't view it as, this is me trying to get better at my craft. I viewed it as, I'm already talented and good, so I'm just meeting myself where I should be at, And so it was, and I enjoyed it and I had fun with it. And it wasn't until I saw my kids' drawings, and I compared my kids' drawings to some old drawings that I had when I did that same age, when I was at the same age. And my kids had grown up with an artist father, grown up in a very creative home. They always saw me drawing. They would always be drawing. And I never really pushed art on them or pushed critiquing on them. Only if they asked, I would help them, but I wouldn't be like, hey, that's eye's a little wonky there, you should probably fix it. I'd just be like, oh, wow, you're drawing, that's so cool. Right. So, but what happens, I compared their art to my art, and my art absolutely stank. Looked like roadkill compared to what my kids were doing. And I realized, I was like, oh, I would not have thought I was anything special with my artist eyes looking at this. I just think, oh, that's kids drawing. But for whatever reason, I had that positive feedback. And that's when I realized that this was a skill that could be essentially learned by anybody if they want to put their time and effort into it.
Well, and I think there are people that inherently start at a certain level, and you can always work to get closer to that level. And you may not. There's always going to be some people that are like here, but I might be starting here, but I can inch my way. I can get closer. And every time I do something and progress forward, I'm that much closer. I do think, that with being kids and drawing, there is this dance between when you're saying, oh man, you drew that so fast, you must be so good. Then that sets a precedent of, okay, well, now if I take my time to draw, does that mean I'm not good? I think rather than valuing the, whoa, I see you really put a ton of effort into that.
Right.
I can see all the work that you put into that. How incredible.
The other one that goes with that, like you did that so fast, was, did you copy?
Yeah.
Did you copy that? And that's where I think one of the unhealthy art practices is that of just coming up with something out of the air, out of thin air, instead of using reference. And
I think that stems from when we're young, like when you're really young. And I think of my kids when they were like 2 and 3, and they're just scribbling like crazy, and there's without any abandon and just drawing full imagination. And then they go into elementary school, and then the one kid says, wow, that looks just like blah. That looks just like this. Can you draw me that? Because it looks so close to the real thing. So then it becomes a definition of being an artist means you can copy really well. And then if you have, like I've said already before, if you have that, then what's going to encourage you to challenge and break that? Because then you probably, without even realizing, have this subconscious definition of it has to look like what I see in order to be good. I can't break from that, because then people will call me out and say, oh, maybe you're not that good. And that's where the self-judging starts. And that's part of the whole fixed mindset of allowing the judging to define your own sense of self-success versus allowing yourself to just put that aside and just grow for the sake of growing.
Isn't it interesting how just a label, like a label that's applied to you when you're 6 versus 30 versus 80, but sometimes those labels that other people give to you, or even that you adopt on your own, can change so much of how you operate. And it's just a label. It's just a category that someone decides that you fall under. Isn't that
I think
weird?
there's a statute of limitations for a label. Like they're very helpful in the short term, but harmful in the long term.
Yeah, absolutely.
The best parenting advice I ever got was from a neighbor right when we started having babies. And I can't remember exactly how it came out, but one of our kids, I was like, yeah, this is my outgoing kid. And this gal sort of pulled me aside and was like, I know this seems like a weird conversation to have, but if you give that label to your kid, then you're always sort of putting that on them. And then does that mean your other kid is not going to be the outgoing kid? And I was so taken back by the whole thing, but I was so appreciative of it at the same time. And I really stopped labeling my kids because of that, which was just an easy thing to do prior.
And it's also, it's a no fault from it. You are going at it with good intentions, especially when you're saying to your kid, oh, wow, you got an 80 or you got a 95 on that test. You're so smart.
You're the smart kid. Yeah.
And then the kid's going, okay, he's internally, he or she, or they're internalizing it as, all right, that's the marker. My parents feel I'm smart because I got a 95. If I don't do well, does that mean that I'm not smart anymore? And there are just layers to it that you can't expect to go into having this complete knowledge of, if this happens, I say this, is what's the perfect thing to say as a parent. I mean, you are going in with full good intention, and it's not like you're trying to, at the time you don't realize that maybe it's putting a pressure on that you didn't intend to do. I mean,
yeah. Oh yeah. So here's a question for both of you. So sometimes we fall in these traps of being in our fixed mindsets because it protects us, it provides us stability, also just gives us a zone to be able to work from. But how do you then transition into the growth mindset so you can get over that plateau or that hump, or maybe just find that sort of next gear to be able to get into for your illustration stuff?
I think the mind shift, and I think this applies to whether you're 25, 35, 45, 55, any age.
Sorry, 65-year-olds.
Sorry, 65. You should have life figured out by then, right?
Yeah.
No, but I think the mind shift is the thing that you want and the thing that you feel that you should be or where you need to be is there are a certain number of failures or a certain number of cycles that you have to go through in order to get to that. And once you understand that, like simplest example is getting fit at the gym, right? So you can absolutely transform your body in a year.
Yeah.
If you go to the gym 5 days a week.
And that's if you're persistent, putting in the effort, and
right. But if you think about it, it's if you do 5 days a week at the gym and 1 hour each one of those times, and it's like, I'm going to run on the treadmill for 30 minutes, and then I'm going to do 30 minutes of weight training of reps, just sitting there moving your body in a bunch of different ways. And that's it. Your body actually
for the YouTube audience, can you lift weights again on camera real quick, Jake? Yeah, okay, yep. Thank you.
maybe
Anyways,
we should cancel that one.
That's all that stands between you and a different shaped body, a healthier, fitter body. That's all that stands in the way. And someone might, and for me too, I've for years thought, oh, those guys at the gym that are so fit, like, how did they do it? Like, what is going on there? And ultimately, you just realize they just have a routine. They're just going through the routine, listen to a podcast or music or whatever, and they're just going through the routine. And it's the same thing if you want to get good at business, if you want to get good at art, if you want to get good at an instrument. All you have to do is get into this routine and this cycle and know that if you stick to that path, there will be failures, but there will also be successes. But ultimately, I think the growth mindset is knowing that all I have to do is go through this sort of gauntlet of repetition, and I will eventually get there.
Well, and I also think with Anthony, what you were saying is it also might be something that you don't necessarily have the growth mindset approach ahead of time for everything, but it might be the reactive moment to a situation where you find yourself reacting in a fixed mindset way. So for one example, I had a book that I had done all the illustrations for, and I was used to kind of not as much feedback, like, oh, that looks great, da, da, da. And the feedback for this one came back pretty lengthy and a lot of suggestions where I initially got defensive. I initially put it away. I couldn't even look at it. I was upset. I felt like they were telling me I wasn't a good artist and that maybe I wasn't right for this book. And I started to internalize all of this and basically feel like they were calling me out and I've been exposed. And then now looking at it, if I kind of had this in the back of my mind, if I had this growth mindset awareness, I could have maybe come to the realization sooner that, okay, these people are giving me feedback that's constructive because they want this book to be the best book it can be. So they're not trying to expose some, like, you're really not who you say you are, da, da, da. Yeah. And maybe some of this critique has value. Maybe actually some of the things they're saying, I might want to take on because it actually might make the work better and isn't the ultimate goal to continue improving my art. And if you're not open to response and critiques from other people, and not like people that you feel that are at, I think, at a level that you aspire to be, those are really good people to get feedback from. But I think then you're open yourself to allowing yourself to grow. So often, and I'm sure you've seen that, where you'll see someone that enters the field already at a talent level that was considered, you're gifted, you were born to do art, and they produce amazing work. And then you'll see this other person come into the scene that's maybe way down here, but they are cranking and they're trying and they keep trying and keep improving. And then you come back maybe a few months later, you're like, whoa, this person has grown so much. They're kind of going here now and raising above because they're absorbing everything. They're open to learning. They're open to the idea that you can grow. And that's where I think a lot of people need to give themselves the ability to know that if you really want to learn how to do something, then there's really nothing stopping you, but just putting the effort and finding the strategies that work for the way you work to help you get there.
Yep.
I think those are some keys.
So I think to like sum it up, recognize what mindset you currently have and where you might have fixed and where you are already in a growth mindset.
Yeah.
And in the areas that you have fixed, and this is the hard part, but it's to see those whatever challenges that you have, look at them instead as opportunities to grow and to learn.
And then I think the more you utilize it, the larger that aspect grows. And it might be something as simple as, I remember in part of her reading of teaching kids that when you learn something, more connections are happening in your brain and your brain is growing. So the more that you challenge yourself, you learn to do something. Each time you learn a new task or a new method, you're turning that temporary image, like a memory, to more of a permanent memory, and you're growing. Your brain is an organ and you need to you feed it and it will grow. And in those moments of failure and challenge, look at it as an opportunity to grow your brain, and you're just ultimately to reach your end goal of getting where you want to go.
Right. And I think the last thing there is to untangle your self-worth from your work, from the work that you're creating, and realize that your art is a part of you, but it is not you. So if people criticize the work that you make, it's not a indictment on you. No, it's just an indictment on that thing that you made, right?
or the bias that those people have too,
or the bias that they have, right?
Right. And be open to growth when you are it's a completely different field, but even look at my older college son who kind of got through high school easily, didn't really have to work at anything. It just kind of naturally came to him, a lot of the challenges that were tasked of him, especially in the math. And then he went into college and he's studying sports analytics, and he's around a lot of kids that are also really into sports analytics. And he had an exam that didn't go well and he was devastated. He's like, but I should do well. And I said, well, how much effort did you put into preparing for this exam? Like, looking back at it, were you just assuming that things were going to go well because you've always been told that you just get this stuff easily? Maybe the material is getting to this challenging place where the effort needs to start coming in to learn the material. And this can only take you so far, but if you want to continue on this and get to where you want to go, there's going to be a point where you need to figure out like what strategies can you implement for this next exam.
Classic,
to maybe,
classic smart kid problem. I've had kids where they're like always one step ahead of the teacher, and then eventually they get to the point where they're one step behind the teacher and they're like, wait, I have to like do homework now. And then I have other kids that are like figured out, you just do the grind of homework and that's how you learn, and it's always hard, and eventually they do better later on because they've sort of built up that studying mechanism instead of just like the clicking. I've had that in art as well, where it's like, oh crap,
and I even say that to myself.
Really figure out.
And I even say it to myself with him, because I'll say, well, maybe that actually was a really good moment that you did fail this. And of course, like, no, it's going to destroy I said, it's not going to destroy your degree. It's not going to destroy, it's one failed moment. Yeah, it was a huge exam that didn't go well, but you can go into the next one figuring out, all right, well, maybe what can you do to prepare yourself for that one and continue to grow? Because it really is not about the grade that gets posted for it's what did you learn from this? Because you're going to be entering the field. You want to really know what you're doing. And which is really hard for my husband, who's a professor of engineering. And so he always faces that if the students are always focused on, I'm the smart kid, I'm just supposed to perform well. And he's like, well, yeah, but you need to learn. We want you to learn the stuff because you want to learn it and to become better at your field. So yeah, it's a parenting podcast.
I'm in. That'd be great. I need to learn how to be a better parent. So yeah, let's do it.
I'm still learning. We still, it's a constant. Even at 21 and 19, you're still, it's always learning.
Yeah. I mean, I was talking to, I always like to ask old people, grandparents or neighbors or whoever, just, what's one thing you didn't expect later in life? And they're like, I am still being a parent. Like I am still parenting my 50-year-old child, which it's comforting to know that, that there's people out there who still have a parent they can.
Yeah. And it just depends on the kid and it changes everything. Like it's just, it may physically be tiring when they're younger and mentally tiring, but then it's all dependent on the kid, but the worry aspect part is always.
I'm pretty sure the worry part never goes away, right?
That's the toughest part.
We just worry.
I got a question here. Should we take it? This comes from Robert. The subject is X marks the spot. And he says, you guys talk a lot about exploring and trying out new things to help you grow as an artist. So it really goes right along with this theme that we've been talking about today. He says, my concern is, how do I know what I'm looking for? And how do I know if I found it once I got there? I tend to get stuck down the rabbit holes. So how do I know when to stop digging or when I need to dig just a little bit more? So, the question is, when you're exploring and you're looking for new things, that could mean two different things. One is getting better at the craft, and the other is pursuing subject matter or projects that push you as an artist. And I think there's two different answers there, depending on what he's looking at. So let's talk about the skills thing first. And as you're growing as an artist, it's like, what do I learn how to draw first? Like you go on YouTube, you type in how to draw, and you're gonna how to draw an eyeball, how to draw a bunny, how to draw a train, how to draw, very specific subject things. And for you as an artist, you want to be able to draw anything that comes to your mind, anything that a client might ask you, anything that your imagination might bring up. So what are the skills and what's the order that you need to go in? And I didn't realize this was going to be an ad for SVS, but we recognize that problem, and we created a foundations program that teaches sort of line by line, here's what you work on first. Once you've learned that, now start working on this thing. Once you've learned that, now you can move to this next step. And essentially what those are is initially you're going to want to learn how to just draw basic shapes, draw them, understand their unique traits and sort of their inherent, what they say psychologically, circles, squares, triangles, understand the design of them, and then extrapolate them into 3D shapes and be able to rotate them and draw them from any direction. And once you do that, then it's all about how to combine shapes and how to subtract out of those shapes. And once you've figured that out, now you're able to draw pretty much anything. You recognize that a train is a long cylinder with a cube and a bunch of little discs along the side of it. And if you can draw a cylinder, a cube, and a disc in any sort of perspective you can imagine, you can draw a train from any perspective that you can imagine. And then once you figure that out, then it's just adding on details. And once you've done that, then you start adding light and shadow. and value to it. And once you've done that, then you start adding color. And then once you figured that out, you start focusing on characters, because characters are way more complex, because the shapes are a little bit more subtle.
I think a train is more complex than a character.
For real?
Oh my gosh, yeah, 100%. Character to me is the easy thing. The rest of that, other than just super organic stuff, is way harder.
I just need a class on bicycles.
Yeah, bicycles, horses, and pianos. Yeah. Playing piano at the same time.
Yeah, but I'm thinking like, I mean, there's Garfield, and then there's Spider-Man, right?
Sure.
And so, I guess Spider-Man would be on the train side of things, and Garfield would be more on the circles side of things, right?
Three ovals side of things,
right?
But
essentially, that's what.
Very right, though. I mean, Garfield is so simplified, where everything you're seeing every detail even more clearly. So it's almost, I think, really tough when you've simplified.
Yeah.
It's, I think, tougher, but.
So I think though, with learning skill, if you can figure out how to sort of nail a concept and then build on top of that, you're gonna be way more productive, way more efficient, and grow a lot faster than if you're just willy-nilly, like, now I know how to draw a very hyper detailed, realistic eyeball, but you have no idea how to apply that to drawing a portrait, right?
Well, and I took this a little differently. I took it more as, let's say you are in the creative field and you're drawing, and then how do you know what you're looking for when you think, I want to grow and get better? To me, it's more, is there something that's interesting that you want to try?
Yeah.
And then just going for for me right now, I'm interested in trying more comic based stuff. So how do I know? So what I'll do is then I'll start looking into that. I might look at people that I think handle it brilliantly, that I think are someone I want to emulate in the way of, I want to learn how they approach this. I want to learn how they approach that. Start researching but then it gets to a point where that phrase, I've adjusted it, where they say those that can do and those that can't study, in the sense that are you avoiding trying it because you're gotten to a point where you're just constantly studying? Now I need this book on how to do figure. Now I need this book. And then at some point, then you just have to try it and start working on it. And I think when you're not good at it or you're failing at it, that's the place where the growth is going to start happening. So surround yourself with maybe people that could give you valid feedback and help you get to that next step. So like with SVSLearn, or you could tell yourself, I want to draw trees, so I'm just going to draw a million trees over and over and over again. That tree's not going to get any better unless you have something to work towards, or just, I'm totally babbling.
No,
you're doing great.
You made
You
me
guys
think of
interject. I just lost my train of thought.
I think where you ended, just having the goal in mind and like what the overall objective is. And I think the objective, it can be a short-term objective or a long-term objective. And then just having that sort of in mind to then add those skills that Jake was talking about. And again, it's funny as he's going through that list, I was like, shapes, then three-dimensional shapes, adding, subtracting, like that's all. Like if I could go back in time, that's all of the stuff that I would have started with, because it's the pure foundation for every illustration that I do today. The best analogy or piece of advice I ever got was from my father regarding this, and he was one of the most awarded and celebrated model shipbuilders of his era. And he said, and again, like master, everything was a scratch build. He built every component by hand. It's incredible. And he said on every single model, all the way up into his 80s, his only goal was to try to learn one new skill to add to it. And again, he's the most celebrated dude in this space. And it was just so like mind-boggling to me that a guy in his 60s, 70s, and then I guess early 80s was like, I'm still trying just to get one thing new or two things new that I didn't do on the last boat. And it was just like, again, what a growth mindset, right? Like just
Oh yeah. I mean, my
create.
mom
Yeah.
is the epitome of that. My mom is a painter in Asheville, and she's continuously taking classes. She's, oh, I want to do printmaking. And so then she found a class with the teacher that she felt was a really great printmaker. Now she's applying that to her own work. I mean, HGTV has done houses around her paintings. She's
Wow.
constantly growing, where I used to say,
Mhm.
you're not allowed to touch the fields that I do because you basically crush everything you try and you got to give me something. But she is inspiring in that way, that she's always trying to figure new things out. And it's
Mhm.
just part of what brings her joy, versus feeling stagnant, or she needs that to be able to keep. And it is amazing watching how much
Right.
her work has changed over the years.
I think you said something too, Sam, where as soon as it starts getting really hard and difficult, pay attention to that. And I
Yeah.
want to say, uh, Robert was saying that how does he know how, when he's got there? Like, how does he know he's found it once he's got there? And I think the key thing is, if you want to explore something and try something out, don't just do the research part, don't just do the dabble part, actually take it to finish,
Yeah.
push through the hard stuff, take it to finish, and then evaluate and say, was the hard stuff worth this final product, right?
Yeah.
And so I'll use comics for example. Comics are extremely hard, time consuming. It's I think one of the hardest things you can do as an illustrator. One of the hardest ways to tell a story, because there's so much drawing and planning and coordinating all these different skills into one thing to make a story.
Yeah.
However, when I hold a finished comic in my hand, I'm just delighted. I have this like butterflies in my stomach where I'm just like, oh my gosh, I made this thing. And I love reading through it and flipping through it. And, I'll see all this stuff I could have done better, but I'll see all the stuff that I did great. And that for me is like, as soon as I finish a comic, I'm like, I want to start the next one. I got to start it. And so that's the thing. When you realize you found it, is that you're like, oh, I can go through all this pain because I value the thing that comes out at the end
Yeah.
so much more than the pain.
And I've been
Because
scared to do comics, but although it's always been part of, like, I grew up, Garfield and Calvin and
Yeah.
Hobbes and Archie comics, and Mad Magazine was like my ultimate favorite reading material. But I've always loved that, and New Yorker cartoons and things like that.
Yeah.
And then I got into picture books, and I felt like my definition was, well, you can do picture books. And I always thought, well, that's what I'm good at. I'm good at picture books. And so then every time I want to, it's there in my brain, but then I get the fixed mindset part goes, but I'm not going to be able to do it. I'm going to fail at this. I'm going to get judged for this. I can't do this. And so even recently, I impulsively, the fixed brain mindset was like, okay, freaking out here. This might be too much. I don't know if you can do this. Open up an Etsy shop real quick and post do your picture book illustrations and start selling those. And in a moment, I'm like, oh, maybe this is what I should do. This is what I should do. This is a good way. And then as I'm doing it, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm just avoiding what I really want to do, but it's because I'm scared. And maybe it's okay that things are not going to be good in the beginning. It's okay that I'm not going to know what I'm doing. And the comics I start doing are probably going to suck, but I have to start going down that path and learning. And then I'm doing your course this weekend, your comics, because I want to learn from people that really know what they're doing. And that's the only way I'm going to grow and get to where I want to go. So I was just avoiding and protecting my own confidence of myself because I was too scared to be vulnerable. And I think extending on that is where I get a little bit apprehensive about with social media, of people when they're posting their sketchbooks, and you're seeing these sketchbooks that are really probably got a lot of time put into them, or they've been worked over, but presented as, here's my little sketchbook, I didn't spend much time on it. It's a little rough. Don't judge me.
Yeah, it's a
Kinds of
masterpiece.
things that it's then putting you at a place of, oh, this is what they do for a sketchbook. Well, why am I even thinking, like, it's that whole mentality of allowing it to get to you and not putting it aside and saying, maybe it's okay to go through some periods of failing and sucking because that's the only way I'm going to be able to get to where I want to go. And it may take me a while, but like you've said, every bit you do will slowly get you closer and closer. And I think it's part maybe just age that you're able to step back more easily and see that versus when you're in your 20s or so that's where I am. And I quickly yesterday, and I deleted the Etsy again because I was like, why didn't I? Nope. I was like, Sam, you're going down that hole. Don't go there. Like,
you should have deleted it after this podcast, though, because then you probably could have gotten some really good sales. Just saying.
No, I'm actually thinking this is where I need to embrace the fixed mindset part of maybe it's something where I do a Patreon and I just start posting my weekly comics, not for the affirmations, but for the being real and open and just letting myself fail
the accountability
and grow.
too.
And I think it's important to have people see that you're failing up.
I will say something. You're going to take me on a little Patreon tangent. I've been doing Patreon for 10 years now. I think nine or 10 years.
Yeah.
A long time. And it is so ingrained in my weekly routine. Like, got to do a Patreon post. What did I work on this week? Oh yeah, I did that. Let's share quickly the process of it and a couple of thoughts on it. And the money from Patreon has been just fine. It hasn't been, anything exciting, but it hasn't been. It's been just enough not to turn off the Patreon.
Yeah.
But the most value that I've gotten from it is to see the growth over the years and to go back 5 years ago and see where my head was at and see what I was working on and see how much I've improved since then. It's sort of been like this forced upon myself project journal that I wouldn't have done otherwise if it wasn't for that. A little bit of financial incentive, but also just accountability.
Well, and I think it's that for me, it is hard. I'm torn because I have I worry, does this enter the world of social media in the way that was not good for me and that was harmful for me and why I left Instagram? I feel like it's different because
it's different.
But I remember you had said, I think it was in one of your earlier newsletters, about having something to keep you, like if you have no deadlines or if you have no
That's my algebra, the algebra of creativity.
Yes.
I refined it for this last newsletter that just
and I am definitely a person that thrives on routine and structure and deadline. I'm not that artist that just has an open-ended schedule and will just freely create every day. I have to have some kind of thing to work towards. And I do find that right now in my period of exploration, that's my biggest struggle, because right now I purposely set upon not having a publication deadline with a fixed book deal. And that has been my biggest struggle, is showing up for, I don't have that deadline to then be all of a sudden freaking out and then going all in. And sometimes that's where a lot of my most creative work comes from. So that is where I was curious if the Patreon would help fill that part of knowing I have people that are paying basically for me to be able to work on this craft and share my experiences. Will that create that necessary stability and structure to keep me, showing up?
I would recommend, there's the Patreon CEO, Jack Conte, I think his name is. He posted a speech he gave, I don't know, South by Southwest or something like that, where he talks about the evolution of online social media, or essentially an artist's relationship with the internet. right? And he tells it through the lens of a musician, because that's his background, musician, but he's also like a filmmaker and a stop motion artist and whatnot. And he talks about how we've gone through this phase where the internet was this great way that you could get access to so many people, and then social media came along. It was this great way to get a follower, right? You never had a follower before social media, and now you've got all these people who've essentially pushed the button to say, I want to hear from you. And then the shift in the algorithm to, instead of showing you what the person made that you subscribe to or that you follow, it instead shows you what everybody else thought was really interesting. And it shows you that first, right?
Yeah.
And that's the algorithm, right? And how now you can have 100,000 followers or 1 million followers, and still only a tiny percentage might even see what the person posts, even though they've all clicked the button to follow them. And how Patreon has been designed to sort of be this evolutionary step in how the internet and how creators have a relationship, but also harkens back to pre-algorithmic internet, where the people who are following you on Patreon are absolutely invested and interested in what you have to do, regardless of what the algorithm thinks. They're just there for you. So I would say listen to that, because he explains it way better than I do.
He's got a really good YouTube channel called Digital Spaghetti, and he puts out videos like, I guess it's once a week. And there's a handful of them that I really like. And he does a really nice job with it. And he's got a lot of energy too. And he's got a lot of energy for creativity. So
yeah, I'll have to look at that.
I'll send it to you.
I'll look at that.
We have another question, but maybe we save that for next time. Just because it's a little bit different from the subject matter of this one, and I feel like we've filled this time pretty good. What do you guys think?
I think that sounds good. Good.
I would like to whenever that question, I want to be on that episode, because that one's going to be really close to me.
I'll either save it for when we're together again, or if you fill in.
Yeah. Well, and then just, it also applies to me in a different way, because I didn't start picture books till I was 40 something. So
now everybody's like, what's this question? What is it? What is it going to be? All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. 3 Point Perspective is made possible by SVSLearn, where becoming a great illustrator starts. And your hosts today were Samantha Cotterill, Anthony Wheeler.
We've known each other for 15 years.
And
Jack
Parker. Oh boy. You know what? If you want to know where these people are at online, Google their names. It's Wheeler with a
Anthony
WWW. A WEWWE.
Isn't Anthony Wheeler also a famous football player?
Yeah. I mean,
not you.
Yeah, I am definitely the least famous of the Anthony Wheelers on the internet. 100%. Make sure you put Anthony Wheeler art, because otherwise the more famous ones show up.
Who'd you say was the boat maker in your
my dad's Steve Wheeler.
Steve Wheeler. So Google Steve Wheeler boats and see what you get.
Yeah, and find my mom. You have to find my mom, Patricia Cotterill.
Cotterill.
Yeah.
Painter.
She's going to be totally red-faced listening. She listens to every podcast. So I have a feeling once this goes live, I'll be getting a text within 5 minutes going, my goodness, what did you just do?
That's amazing.
So my mom was super creative. She passed away 5 years ago, but she was a seamstress. So she loved to sew, and she could solve any sewing problem.
Wow, that's impressive. Right? Wow.
So people would bring her things that, like, can you alter this to fit me? Or they would bring her a picture and say, can you sew this? This is the prom dress I want. And she'd make it. She'd go get the material and make it, right? Yeah. Very, very creative. But she, in college, wanted to be an artist, wanted to paint. And she bought all of her supplies and everything, signed up for a painting 101 or whatever. And like a day or two before class started, all of her art supplies got stolen. So she dropped the class
Oh.
and went and did something else. She couldn't afford to replace all the art supplies. So I guess I was the manifestation of her artistic dreams on that level. Who knows? But,
yeah, that's probably why I went to school and studied microbiology and food bacteriology, because I wanted to prove, like, I'm not the artist that you say I am. Like, you don't know me. I think I mentioned that to you before.
Hold my paintbrush.
Yeah.
Go study DNA. All right. Were we doing an outro? We were, weren't we?
No, we were. See, I get sidetracked. I get distracted easily.
No, that was my fault. I told the story about my mom. Okay, so podcast produced by Daniel 2. That's Daniel TU. Special thanks to our keeper of the curriculum, Austin Shirtliff, our show notes wrangler, Lily Howell, our chief operations officer, Lisa Fott, and our illustrator, Annalise Black. Now, go draw something.
God, Anthony, you did it.
No, I refuse to do the finger guns. It's too early. I can do it after 3 p.m.
Too early in the day for finger. It's not spicy food.
No. But if it was, Jake, if it was.
All right. Peace out.